Alright, testing, testing. Hey, this is Dark Angel here, guys. So, sorry about that. So, I'm getting ready to put into test. Uh, I'm getting ready to make a challenge uh, to the city where I live at, parking enforcement deal. So, let me give you a little back history on the where I live. I actually live in a complex that is off of a main street that has designated parking areas. Uh, and I know you can see my screen here. It says, let me guess, license and registration, right? No car registration required by law. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read this to you guys, but I'm gonna give you a little back history on it first before I do. Uh, what has happened is yours truly, the Dark Angel, was issued one of these. Now I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Okay, so I was issued one of those. And I am not going to move my automobile. I'm not. I'm going to let it stay there where it's at, where it's been at in a designated parking area. So when I looked up that code, the code that's on there that it says BMC 10-10-070 section B section 1, it talks about on-street parking or storage of automobile on a street, etc., etc. Nowhere does it say anything about designated parking area. So what happened was a resident, uh, whom I won't mention any names, she is a disgrace to human flesh, or as what we call a woman. She is, her and my girl have some differences. So she's one of those Karens that decides that she wants to take everything out on everybody. Thinks that she is above everybody and thinks that she's better than everybody. One of those type deals. So, with that being said, it's a shame that people like her exist. So, but they do, and sometimes the innocent suffers the consequences. So, me being the innocent, because I personally do not associate with this individual and do not, don't influence, entice, provoke, or anything of that magnitude where that woman is concerned, she has decided to call parking enforcement because my automobile has private plates on it. Well, they came out and stuck that on the car, and the parking enforcements, my wife actually went out and talked to the parking enforcement lady, and the lady said, told us who filed the complaint. So the lady was taking pictures of my automobile, and she made note of the notice that was in the window, notifying them notice of liability that any taking of this property would amount to that of $200,000. So she said that she wanted to show her bosses that because I clearly have it marked as private property, and any taking of the property, you know, $200,000. So I went to call that office and, you know, more or less validate my notice of liability. Unfortunately, I did not manage to succeed in contacting them as their offices was closed. However, what I'm doing now, what I am reading to you now, or what I'm going to read to you now about the UCC. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind too, the UCCs are not actual law. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to find a case law that actually has inserted UCC within their opinion. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is the automobile, mine, is not registered with the state. It's not plated with the state. It's not contracted through the state. Okay, so basically what I've done is I went and I printed this off. Okay, and I'm going to attach some other things to this, but this is what's going to go because I am going to bring uh, reverse compensation charges against the city if they decide that they want to try to take my automobile, and I will bring charges against the individual that was verified who filed the complaint, because here at the complex we have designated parking areas and they are off of a street. Now that code that I showed you on that orange ticket, it is in reference to on-street parking, not designated parking areas. Okay, so therefore the enforcement cannot be enforced based on the fact that the complex themselves, the managers here at the complex, has never filed a complaint against myself or my automobile. They've never done it. Uh, this complaint actually, the enforcement officer actually said the name of the individual, which my wife pretty much already knew who it was. And then when the officer validated it by name, her by name, that pretty much just told me where the whole thing was coming from. So basically what's going on now is this. I'm getting ready to file paperwork and I'm going to have it sitting here ready to go because I want the ticket to come. I want everything to be a fallout so that it teaches the city that, you know, we the people run the city. You understand? Now, some of you might say, "Oh, well, you know, Angel, that's not that is how you do it," because it's pretty sad when people fear the government when you actually control the government. So, in my opinion, not in my opinion, in my account, I would say that those of you who fear government remain enslaved by your captors. Okay, by your owners, because I refuse to do it, and I'm doing everything in honor. You know, I'm not going up over next door. I can go right next door to this woman's house and actually have it out with her. No need. You know, it's going to be a surprise to her when she finds out that she's going to be one of the defendants listed in the suit. So, without further ado, we're going to get into this. So, no car registration is required by law. Okay, now you got to keep in mind statutes, codes, policies, regulations. Those are all secondary laws. Okay, secondary. They're not primary law. Okay, you have mandatory law, which is the federal constitution, the Constitution, and then you have anything secondary that comes afterwards. Okay, so statutes are not law. They're secondary. Yes, they are a form of law, but they are not the primary law. They are secondary. You have primary and secondary laws. And if you don't understand that, you know, you need to look that up. What is a primary law? What is a secondary law? Okay? So, but again, like I said, UCCs are not law within themselves. They are a reference, a guideline. Okay, so what you want again is you would need, sorry about that, you would need to find case law that references the UCCs. Okay, so in here we're going to go like this. So here's what we're going to do. UCC Article 9, secured transactions, sales of accounts, and chattel paper. Part 1, short title, applicability and definitions. 9109, classification of goods, consumer goods, equipment farm products inventory. Goods are. Okay. Now this is straight out the UCC book too, by the way. Consumer goods if they are used or bought for use primarily for personal, family, or household purposes. Equipment if they are used or bought for use primarily in business, including farming or a profession, or by a debtor who is a non-profit organization or governmental subdivision or agency, or if the goods are not included in the definitions of inventory, farm products, or consumer goods. Relevant applicable stare decisis case cites relating directly to UCC 9109. Under UCC 9109, there is a real distinction. Listen to this, guys. There is a real distinction between goods purchased for personal use and those purchased for business use. Okay? Okay, let me do this. A real distinction between goods purchased for personal use and those purchased for business use. Okay? The two are mutually exclusive, and the principal use to which the property is put should be considered as determinative. James Talcott Insurance Company versus Jeep, 5 UCC Rep Service 1028 266 Cal Pell. Now you see how that did that? They added a case law here, okay, right here, from a court, okay, that validates the use of UCC 9109. Okay. Now you're going to go down here now. The classification of goods in UCC 9109 are mutually exclusive. Okay. McFadden versus Mercantile Safe Deposit and Trust Company, 8 UCC Rep Serv 766 260 MD 601 273A 2D 198 1971. And that other one was a 1968 reference. This is a 1971 reference. Automobile purchased for the purpose of transporting buyer to and from his place of employment is considered or was consumer goods as defined in UCC 9109. Malacot versus Finance and Loan Court, 3 UCC Rep. Serv 1035, 415 Southwest Tennessee Appellant, 1966. The provisions of UCC 2-316 of Maryland UCC do not apply to sales of consumer goods, a term which includes automobiles, whether new or used, that are bought primarily for personal, family, or household use. Maryland Independent Automobile Dealers Association versus the Administrator of Motor Vehicle Administration, 25 UCC Rep Serv 699 394 A 2D 820 41 MD Appellant 7 1978. Now, federal case law, ladies and gentlemen, if the state's statutes conflict with federal law, who has precedence? Federal law. Henry Barnes, United States District Court, D, Maine, September 5th, 1972, bankruptcy. I'm not going to get into those numbers because those are obviously the case numbers. 9109, consumer goods, automobile for transportation to and from work. The use of a vehicle by its owner for purposes of traveling to and from his employment is personal as opposed to business use, as that term is used in UCC 9109-1 and the vehicle will be classified as consumer goods rather than equipment, meaning farming equipment, commercial equipment, etc., etc. The phraseology of 91092 defining equipment as goods used or bought for use primarily in business seems to contemplate a distinction between the use of collateral in business and the mere use of collateral for some commercial, economic, or income producing purpose by one not engaged in business. Now, keep in mind, this is not someone's opinion, what I'm reading to you from, okay? This is actually cited in case law. The appropriate filing place turns upon the classification of the collateral as consumer goods or equipment. The Uniform Commercial Code classifies goods as consumer goods if they are used or bought for use primarily for personal, family, or household purposes. To Section 2 FN 211 MRSA Section 911091. It is the court's opinion, listen to this now, this is all federal case law now. It is the court's opinion that the use of a vehicle by its owner for purposes of traveling to and from his employment is a personal as opposed to a business use. Now listen, here it goes right here. It is the court's opinion, okay, that the use of a vehicle by its owner for purpose of traveling to and from his employment is a personal as opposed to a business use, as that term is used in UCC 9109. The phraseology of UCC 9109 Section 2 defining equipment as good used or bought for use primarily in business seems to contemplate a distinction between the use of collateral in business and the mere use of collateral for some commercial, economic, or income producing purposes by one not engaged in business. Traveling to and from work is a personal use, not a business use. This ruling is consistent with the undisputed fact that the classification of goods is determined by its primary use, Barron's Law Dictionary 3rd edition 1991, and not by the type of goods including, but not limited to, vehicles. Now, consumer goods are not required to be registered. A vehicle not used for commercial activity is a consumer goods. It is not a type of vehicle required to be registered and use tax paid by which the tab is evidence of receipt of a tax. Bank of Boston versus Jones, 4 UCC Rep Serve, 1021, 236 A2D, 484 UCC PP 910914. Thus, self-driven vehicles are classified according to the use of which they are put rather than according to the means by which they are propelled. The Supreme Court in Arthur v. Morgan, 112 U.S. 495, 5 South Supreme Court, 241 to 28 LED 825, held that carriages, listen now, held that carriages were properly classified as household effects, and we see no reason that automobiles should not be similarly disposed of. Also see Hillhouse versus United States. 1907. And to go back, if you look at one of my past videos, you'll notice in one of those videos I was explaining to you about motor vehicle laws. Okay, when the automobile first came out, there was no laws governing the automobile. There was no license. Okay, so therefore, driving was a right under the right to locomotion, because at that time you had horse and carriage. And then horseless carriage, the automobile, came along, and freedom of locomotion, the right to free movement, tax free automobiles was created. Now, granted, those rules and all that changed over time. We all know all that. We ain't even trying to get into all that. But it's the underlying fact that a lot of people seem to misunderstand and miss. When automobiles was first invented, there was no laws governing automobiles. You get in a car and take off and go wherever you wanted to. No license required, no registration required. It was a right. And over the decades, that right was taken away from everybody, and no one realized that. You have to go back and look at the history of the automobile, and then look at the implementation of the license. The automobile came out, then the license came out. Okay. So the law that was out at the time was what law? The right to locomotion. A soldier's personal automobile is part of his household goods. U.S. versus Bomber, CA 5 Tex, 8 Federal 3D, 226, 235, 19A Words and Phrases, Permanent Edition, West Pocket Part 3, Part 94. The exemptions provided for in Section 1 of the Motor Vehicle Transportation License Act of 1925, Stats 1925, page 833, in favor of those who solely transport their own property or employees, or both, and of those who transport no persons or property for hire or compensation by motor vehicle, have been determined in the Bacon Service Corporation case to be lawful exemptions. Inri Schmuckelke, I hope I just butchered that name, sorry. 1926, 199 Cal 4246. The right of a citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business is a common right. Let me show you that. In the ordinary course of life and business is a common right, which he has under his right to enjoy life and liberty. It includes the right, in so doing, to use the ordinary and usual conveyances of the day, and under existing modes of travel includes the right to drive a horse-drawn carriage or wagon thereon, or to operate an automobile thereon for the usual and ordinary purposes of life and business. It is not a, here we go. It is not a, what? What does that say? Mere privilege. Mere privilege. It is not a privilege. Okay? Now, here's where everybody seems to understand. And this is Thompson versus Smith, so So Thoughts of Patrol Officer, this goes out to you because you're the one that made a video on this talking about you still need a license. You fail to understand something. This court, this Supreme Court, has ruled that under existing modes of travel includes the right to drive a horse-drawn carriage or wagon thereon, or to operate an automobile thereon for the usual and ordinary purposes of life and business. It is not a mere privilege. Privilege you can regulate. Thoughts of an Officer Ben. You can regulate this privilege right here. You cannot regulate a right. And it's funny because that actually says a right to drive. A right to drive. Why? Because, as I said, there was no laws governing automobiles back then. And that's where everybody seems to fail to understand and realize that back then there was no laws governing automobiles. But you had a right to drive. If you had a right to drive a horse-drawn carriage and you didn't need a license, or a wagon, and then the horseless carriage came about, there was no law governing it, so it was a right. People, driving is a right that was taken away from you and turned into a privilege. I mean, it's not that hard. Okay? It is not a mere privilege like the privilege of moving a house in the street, operating a business stand in the street, or transporting persons or property for hire along the street, which the city may permit or prohibit at will. Thompson versus Smith, 154 Southeast 579. And what that's saying is this. That's not saying that you can't drive on the streets. It's not even referencing that. It's referencing the privilege of moving a house. Sorry, guys. It's referencing the privilege of moving a house in the street, operating a business stand in the street, or transporting persons or property for hire, meaning buses, motor carriers that move property, along the street, which the city can prohibit or permit at will. They can stop that from happening if they want to. Okay? In view of this rule, a statutory provision that the supervising officials may exempt such persons when the transportation is not on a commercial basis means that they must exempt them. State versus Johnson. And we live in the dark days when common people fear the government more than criminals. Let me highlight that. When common people fear the government more than criminals. And it's so true. It's a factual statement, So, with that being said, guys, this is Dark Angel. I actually hit a 30-minute mark right on the nose. So, with all that being said, that's what's going down. And for those of you trolls, haters, traitors, bootlickers, all y'all who don't seem to understand the law, I just broke it down for you right there. in Thompson versus Smith, it clearly states that driving is a right, always has been. The only thing you can regulate is the privilege. Right there. It's not a mere privilege, meaning you just can't take that away. Okay? That's what that means. It's not a mere privilege. And for those of you who misinterpret what that says, I just broke it down for you. And if you don't understand it from that point, then you're just an idiot. Well, this is Dark Angel. You know, it was great talking to you guys. I want to thank all of my new subscribers, uh, all of my new followers. I want to thank a lot of the subscribers who actually interact with me. You haters, traitors, bootlickers, and trolls, you can interact too. I'm going to shut y'all down because that's what I've been doing. Fiddletown 2021, whatever you are, Black Prince, all of you guys are just, you guys are so out of the know that you have no clue. You keep wanting to cite state citations and all these things right here. You know, get you some Supreme Court cases that support anything that you're saying. I just showed you in this whole thing right here federal citations, okay, that contradict state statutes. Okay? United States District Court, that's federal, for those of you that don't know. Okay? That's federal. State statute comes in conflict with the federal law. Federal law, through that, but pursuant to that of the Supremacy Clause written in that of the Constitution, clearly states that the federal law takes precedence. It supersedes state law. State law says that in order for you to have a motor vehicle or automobile, I'm gonna refer to automobile because it actually does here in Washington say automobile. I do believe it references both. I could be wrong on that, but in order to have a automobile or motor vehicle on the public roads, it has to be licensed, registered. No, it doesn't. Not according to federal law. Federal law says it doesn't. That's a fact. And I'm running with that fact on this little citation thing that I showed you right here earlier. I'm going to go with that. You know, and they're talking about that my automobile is parked in a parking lot that's been there for more than 5 days. That automobile actually has been sitting there longer than that because it doesn't have a drive shaft in it. And I'm not going to get into the extent of how long that automobile has been sitting there, but it has been sitting there for a minute. You know, but on the same strength, that is my personal, I use it every day automobile, you know, when it is up and running. I have been under the weather, for those of you that do know. I have been under the weather for a while. I've been sick. I've been in and out of the hospital. And I am actually getting better, you know. And it takes longer for us older guys, for us old heads, to get better once we do get sick, you know. But on that same strength, I am getting better. For those of you who was concerned about my health and my condition, I am getting better. I'm feeling a lot better, been a lot more energetic the past few days, done a lot more stuff around, in and around the house, and eventually once the weather gets cleared up here, I'll get out there and get my drive shaft reconnected and put back on. But on the same strength, I will also keep you guys posted and updated as to the outcome of what is going to go down with this. Okay? Like I said, I'm going to let them ticket it. I'm going to let them ticket it. I'm going to let them tow it. And then I'm going to sue them. And I'm going to sue them for big money. I'm going to sue them for what is actually on my notice that's actually taped inside the window. And then I'm going to sue them for other damages that they've, you know, created. So, with that being said, this is Dark Angel. I'm out of here. Deuces.